Well, good morning. Man, thank you so much for being here with us, whether you are in-house with me right now, whether you're watching on the internet, or if you are at our sister church down in Elmira. Thank you for making us a part of your day and a part of your week as we continue this series talking about it is okay not to be okay. That's just a reality of life. There are simply going to be times when we experience these valleys. There are going to be times where we have things happen that we were not expecting, that we were not anticipating, that didn't follow our plans, and that life isn't going well. And when we engage with these moments, it's okay. But we also serve a God who wants to move us through those, to teach us something through it, to help us along the journey. And so as we talk about these sort of things, I don't want you to be confused. This isn't some sort of academic experiment for those of us that are speaking. Most of the time when the things that we are talking about are things that are an overflow out of our lives, stuff that we have experienced, things that we've seen, whether it's from our friends, our parishioners, our family, or within our own lives. And so when we talk about these moments of life where it is simply not okay, recognize that these are experiences that we have had, that we have been in the trenches, that we have been in these moments. And today, if you look at your notes, you'll see that we're going to talk about the death of a dream. What happens in our lives when the expectations that we have don't plan out? What happens in our lives when the ship of our dreams has crashed up against the rocks of reality and things aren't going as we hoped? Maybe this isn't a job. You get there, you think it's going to be great, it's going to be awesome, and it's horrible. Maybe it's in a marriage. You have sort of an expectation for who your perfect spouse is and what they were going to be, what they could be, what they should be, and some of you are hoping to change them into what they will be, right? And that didn't work out. And now you're disappointed. You don't understand what happens. For Shara and I, this journey of the death of our dreams started about 1.5 years ago. We got to move here to Victory, and we were so excited. We were excited for a couple things. One was we were excited just to be at a place that we felt wanted us, and we were loved, and we wanted to love and serve. For me, I was continuing my work through my doctoral program, and I just always had this dream that I would finish that up. For Shara, one of her main dreams, and if you know Shara came from a big family, all right? I came from a well-sized family, which it was basically me and my sister. And sometimes that was crowded, all right? So, I just didn't have a context for Shara's life. Shara is one of 6 children. In Idaho, they have them in herds, all right? It is like a litters of kids. It blew me away. And she kind of always had this expectation that we would not just have children, right? But that our harvest would be bountiful, all right? That's just sort of the way she played life. That's the way she thought about it. For me, I was a little more hesitant, but eventually we had Harper, and that was great. So I thought, hey, we had one, let's not screw it up. But she came to a place where we talked about, she's like, I really want to grow our family. And Shara meant exponentially. And so when we actually moved here 1.5 years ago in May, we came here expecting a child, what would have been our second child. We actually went to Disney right before we came here, and we had taken a picture. You can see the picture up here on the screen. This is the picture that we were going to announce with, right? That's me as dad, playing the role of dad, in case you didn't recognize the not big beard. That's Shara, right? And that's Harper. She's going to be a big sister, very excited. She had no clue what that shirt says. She's just smiling because she's at Disney. And that's Shara, excited to be a mom. That picture we were going to show you Father's Day last year as our announcement. And what happened is the week before Father's Day, at 12 weeks pregnant, we lost our child. And a dream died. And it was a monumental shift in our life, where this desire that we had, this hope that we had, the expectation of how our life was going to play out wasn't happening. And then, as most of you know, a month after that, Shara found a lump. A month after that, she was diagnosed with breast cancer. She went through some pretty tough rounds of chemo. And then at the beginning of this past year, because of the type of cancer she had to have her ovaries removed. And what it meant was life would never look the same. That these hopes and these dreams and these expectations that we had for what our life was going to be wasn't going to happen. Not the way we had planned it. And when we're in those moments, what we realize is that someplace up here are our expectations. And someplace down here is reality. And disappointment is the space between our expectations and our reality. Disappointment and devastation is what we experience when our hopes and dreams are dashed upon the rocks of reality. And we all have this. We can all talk about a moment where something happened in our lives and we were disappointed, right? And we looked around and we just sort of thought, man, God, you can do better than this. God, you can do something here. This is not the way I had planned out my life. This is not the expectation that I had for how life was going to go for me, for us. And we all experience these moments. We all have the stories. Each of us are on a journey, and our journey is always filled with twists, with turns, with bumps, and what sometimes feels like cliffs that we aren't expecting, and most times we aren't ready for. And there's two stories in Scripture that sort of talk about the situation, but in different directions. The first story is found in Genesis, right? It's a story of Joseph. I've always loved the story of Joseph. Some of you know my first name is actually Joseph. It's my dad's name. It's a family name. And so sometimes we connect with Bible stories, especially as a kid, that sort of connect with our name. And I was always mad when I would hear preachers talk about Joseph, and I didn't feel like they gave him his just due. I loved his story. And God gives him dreams. He gives him these expectations. He gives him the dream that he is going to rule, specifically at one point, over his brothers. And in his infinite male wisdom, he tells his brothers this, right? And if you have any sibling dynamic in your family, you can imagine how this went, right? Younger brother comes back, he says, I had a dream by God. What is it? You guys are gonna bow to me. And they're like, and you're gonna die, which is exactly what they try, right? This is crazy. This isn't like your typical Thanksgiving family disagreement. They beat him up and throw him in a pit. Some of you are like, no, that sounds just like our Thanksgiving. Yeah. Were you there? How did you know? I don't remember Facebooking that, yeah. They beat him up, they throw him in a pit, and their minds basically, we're gonna leave him to die. And then they gotta figure out what to do with him, right? Because this is not the type of action that you can be like, okay, listen, if we let you out of the pit, don't tell dad, right? Dad's gonna find out. This is his favorite. And so the group of brothers get together and they decide they're going to sell him into slavery. Let's be honest. It's hard to dream when you're in the pit, isn't it? It's hard to dream when you feel betrayed, when you feel shut down. And his life starts to make a turn because the guy that buys him is a pretty good master, and he works his way through the ranks. And eventually that man's, Potiphar, his wife, tries to seduce Joseph. And when Joseph says no, she makes up a story and she has him sent to prison. Now he's gone from the pit to prison. And if you can imagine with me for a moment what it's like to be inside of Joseph's life. All these expectations, all of these thoughts, all of these dreams, everything that you think God had given you, and you're rotting in prison. And this isn't some sort of white collar, cushy prison, right? This is old school, down in a cellar, damp, wet, dirty prison. And if the story ended there, it would be where a lot of us feel like we are, maybe even right now. But the fact of the matter is that there are times when even when our dream has died, it experiences a resurrection. I have a professor and he's a mentor friend, and he makes this statement. He says, don't put a period where God has put a comma. There are simply times that we get to see this happen. And for Joseph, the process molded him and shaped him into the person he was to become. And eventually, through a series of miraculous events and interventions, Joseph is moved from the pit to the prison and from the prison to the palace. And it happens exactly the way God said it would. Eventually, he sees his brothers bow before him. He rules over a nation. He saves a group of people. It's not the journey he would have picked. Or as I like to say, this is not the way I would have written my story, but the pen's not in my hand. There are times when we don't understand what's ahead of us. Let's listen. God's plans are often different than our plans. God's plans are often better than our plans. Where he wants us to be. If God would have told you where you were going to be now 10, 15, 20 years ago. Okay, here's the real question. We're all friends here at Victory, all right? This is the interactive portion of the session. If you're new here, this is sort of freaking you out a little bit. I'll just explain how it goes. This is very technical public speaker terms. I'm going to give what's called a question. Again, this is like PhD level stuff. And you're going to give and I don't know how they do this in your culture, where you're from, but here, you're going to give what's called an answer, all right? How many of you are a little bit more like me? You're a little more free-flowing, a little more willy-nilly, like, yeah, plans are fine, but they're going to change. Raise your hand if you're one of those. Okay, all right. I love this because I can already look out and I know who's sitting beside who. This is great. How many of you are just honest and you're like, I have a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, a couple contingency plans. I know what we're having for lunch for the next 3 weeks, and my outfits are planned for the next 7 days, at least, maybe a year. Raise your hand, let's go. It's all right, yeah, every time. I don't know why God does this, but these people marry each other all the time. Yeah. That's Shara, right? Shara's a planner. Shara understood. We look at our week and she's like, okay, we're going to clean here. We're going to eat here. This is where we have fun. She's plans, fun times right here. This over here, that's a no fun zone, all right? Fun right here. She's like, and I'm like, how do you know it's only going to take us 36 minutes and 14 seconds to eat? She's like, oh, once we get there, I just move the plates, all right? Like, it's just like she's got her plan down. She knows, but for you that are planners, this makes you sweat a little bit because this is out of your control. And you're going to have to realize that maybe the things that you planned aren't going to happen the way you wanted them to. For those of you that are like me and you're a little bit less plan-oriented, the fact of the matter is you still have expectations for life. You still have things that you want, things that you desire, things that you hope happen. And when those don't happen, it's disappointing. But sometimes it's just the fact that God can't show us everything before it happens. Listen, if you would have told me in junior high when I was slightly more awkward, just a tad, which I know is hard for some of you to believe, but it can happen. And I was a stutterer and I was tongue-tied. If God would have told 7th and 8th grade Aaron that he was going to make his living speaking in front of people, he would have told you you're crazy. See, 7th, 8th grade into high school, Aaron wanted to be a doctor. Reason number one, doctors make more money than preachers. Fact. You can argue with a lot of what I say today. You cannot argue with that. That's a fact. Not only a doctor, I wanted to be a surgeon. The reason I wanted to be a surgeon is because surgeons don't really have to talk to people. You walk out, you tell them what you're going to do, you leave. The nurse kind of takes care of them, does all the nice stuff, and then you come back in when they're asleep. You cut them open, you do your thing, you leave. You don't have to deal with talking to people. I didn't like to talk with people. I like to talk, but I didn't like to talk with people because it just, I knew I was going to stumble, or I was going to stutter, or a word was going to come out weird. If you would have told me at that point the journey that I was going to take to get me here, I would have run away screaming. Shara had one profession. If you would ask high school or early college, Shara, what's the one profession you don't want to marry into? You know what she would have said? A pastor. Because she's sane. Somebody once asked me, they said, what would you do if your daughter became a preacher? I was like, well, that's fine as long as she doesn't marry one. Right? Like it is. The plans that God had for us were different than what we expected. And there were times that plans changed and dreams died that came into fruition differently later on in life. There are simply times, right? Sometimes we get to see our dreams come into fruition. Other times, it requires faith in God's greater plan. So our first story, we have Joseph starts in the desert, moves to the palace. The next story is a guy named Moses. Moses is born as a Jew. He's a Hebrew baby, but he gets adopted by the royalty, by the Pharaoh's family. So he gets to live a life of luxury in the palace. Things are going great for him. He gets to eat their food. He gets to drink their wine. He gets to hang out at the royal parties. He is living a life of luxury. But at some point, he looks out and he sees the other Jewish people, the people of Israel. And they're enslaved and they're oppressed and they're being broken and they're being beaten. And God gives him a vision. He gives him a dream, an expectation that Moses is going to be the man who moves the people of Israel out of enslavement, out of bondage, and into a promised land. He says, I gave you a land to your forefathers, to your ancestors. You're going to go and you're going to claim it. And Moses, you're going to be the guy to take them there. And he gets to do it. He gets to get the people freed from bondage. He takes them out of Egypt and he gets them right to the boundaries of the promised land. It is so close, he can taste it. And because of some of his choices, it stops right there. You see, Moses never got to experience the reality of his dream. And there's a moment where God takes Moses up into a mountain and he looks and he says, you're just going to have to trust me that I'm going to get the people there without you. And there's actually a passage where Moses is seemingly begging God, can't you just let me walk in? Can't you just let my dream be fulfilled? Can't you let me experience this thing that I have hoped for, that I have prayed for, that I have wanted? Can you just let me walk through let me just get into the land. Let me lead my people where I thought I was supposed to lead them. And God says no. And while you have Joseph, who moved out of the desert into a pit, into the prison, and ends up in the palace, you have Moses, who starts in the palace and dies in the desert, never getting to see the fulfillment of his dream. And he had to trust and put faith in the faithfulness of God's plan. That God was going to do what he said he would do. And that he could trust his people with the God that he was serving. But his dream died. His expectations were not met. And the fact is, that happens sometimes. There are theological perspectives. There are people that say, sometimes you'll hear, as long as you have enough faith, or as long as you're doing the right things, as long as you say it the right way, that everything's going to pan out, that eventually you're going to prosper, you're going to grow, everything's going to be all right. And the fact of the matter is that simply isn't the case. There are times when we eventually get to see our dream play out. that we get to see the fruition of the expectations and dreams that we had, but there are times that we just have to trust that God is doing the right thing. And that giving us everything that we think we want. We heard that passage that Taylor quoted to us about that if we follow after God, that he will give us the desires of our heart. And I think what we hear sometimes is God, what I desire and what I'm pretty sure I need is one of those new Corvettes. You understand? Yeah, some people got blessed on that one. They didn't hear anything I said, but they heard a Corvette. They're like, I'm in. I like this preacher. Let's go. That's right. And we think that just because we want something, that's what's best for us. And listen, I got to be honest, man. You've seen Harper. You've seen my daughter. You've seen the picture. You maybe seen her running around. She's a very cute child. And it is very difficult for me as a father not to give her what she thinks she needs and definitely wants. And once we found out that biologically we weren't going to be able to have any more children, it made it even more difficult because I just want to give her the best and I want to give her what she wants and she thinks this is what I just want to, and can you imagine what she would, listen, it may make her happy in the moment, but it is not going to make her a fully healthy and functional adult. Because if she just keeps getting what she wants every time, she's going to be an entitled, spoiled individual that's going to use her power of cuteness to get what she wants for the rest of her life. And some of you, that doesn't sound like such a bad deal, right? But it's a problem. And I have to sometimes explain to her, this is not real life. We go places and people just give her things for no reason. We're in a gas station. And this lady looks at Harper, she's like, oh, does she like candy? I'm like, I mean, she's a kid, of course she likes candy. She's like, can she have candy? I'm like right now? She's like, yeah, this lady takes out money and buys my child a piece of candy and hands it to her. And I'm like, Harper, this is not real life. And Harper's like, it sort of feels like real life. Which is cute when you're a kid, but it's not cute when you're an adult. And for her to grow into the type of person that God desires her to be and that I want her to be, a selfless, kind individual who recognizes they can put others' needs above themselves, I can't simply give her everything she wants. What I have to do is to start shaping her desires so that she wants good things. And God says if you'll follow after him, he will start to shape your desires. And when those desires line up with what's best for you and his plan, you will be given in full. But sometimes that means the dreams and the expectations that we have are crushed. And listen, don't let anyone ever tell you as a Christian that you can't mourn and be sad about the death of the dreams that you had. I once heard a pastor speaking about, in essence, how holy he had become. And the illustration that he said is he was fixing a roof and he hit his thumb with a hammer, and the only thought and words that he could say was, oh, praise God. And I was like, dude, you are weird. Because oh, praise God is not the first word that comes out of my mouth when I hit my thumb with a hammer. I'm not going to tell you what the first word that I think that comes out. I'm just kidding. I don't say that because Shara would get me in trouble. But, right, like, we are natural, emotional human beings, and there are going to be times that our responses to things are pain and hurt. And listen, we mourn. We absolutely mourn the death of our expectations and the death of our dreams. But Paul tells the church in 1 Thessalonians, he in essence says, we mourn, but we do it with hope. We do it with hope because we have a hope that we have a God who loves us and cares for us and wants something good for us. We do it because we serve a God that promises us that there is an eventual resurrection because we are looking for eternity. And sometimes our hope plays out in this life. Sometimes we see the fruition of the dream that we desired, hoped for, and prayed for. And sometimes we just have to understand that that hope will not be fully experienced until Christ comes back. If you're here today and you're a skeptic, or maybe you're further on that you don't believe in any sort of divine, or you don't believe in any sort of life after this, that this is all there is, I fully understand why when one of your dreams or expectation dies, it feels absolutely devastating. And it feels like there is no hope. I get it. But if we're followers of Christ, do we mourn? Absolutely. Are we broken and sad? Absolutely. But we do it in a way where we recognize the hope that comes with placing our faith in Jesus. That's how we move through these valleys. Paul says it like this in 2 Corinthians. He's talking about this affliction that he has. Something has happened to him that is not what he planned for, not what he expected, not what he dreamt for his life. And it's causing him pain. It's causing him distress. And he says, I was given a thorn in my flesh. I was given this thing inside of me. Something was happening in this causing pain. I was given a thorn in my flesh. He calls it a messenger from Satan to torment me. And he says, three times I prayed to God to take it away from me. But God responded with this, my grace is sufficient for you, and my power is made perfect in your weakness. Over and again, I just see Paul going, listen, can you take this away? This isn't what I wanted. Can you change this? This isn't what I dreamt. Can you do something? This isn't the expectation that I had for my life. And God says, I understand and I get it, but listen, this is the way it has to happen. And I know it hurts, and I know it's painful, but you can't see the whole plan. Don't put a period where I have put a comma. So what do we see in this? The way that we move through these moments is found in the scriptures we just talked about. The first thing is, his power is perfect. His power is perfect. We serve a God that is powerful enough to step in. We serve a God who can miraculously intervene in the situation. I've seen him do it. If we're going to be able to move through these moments of life, then we have to have a realization that the God that we are serving actually can do something about it. That the God that we are serving is powerful enough, that there is a strength there. So the first thing we see is that his power is perfect. Second thing that we see, his grace is enough. His grace is enough. See, God doesn't tell us we will never experience hardships. God doesn't promise we will never experience pain. God doesn't even tell us it'll all pan out the way we thought would in the end. Here's what he does promise. His presence is with us in the journey. That he is there. That he is sharing his grace with us. And that when he shares that with us, it is enough. And it doesn't feel like it sometimes, and we don't understand how this works, but the presence of God in our lives is enough. It changes the way we look at our situations and our scenarios. His power is perfect. His grace is enough. This third one is what it hinges on. His love is comforting. You see, a God that is powerful enough to do whatever he wants, but doesn't actually care, isn't a God that I want to worship. That's a dictator. Someone who sort of plays the puppet strings, but doesn't love his creation, doesn't really want to intervene. In scripture and through Christian theology and through my experience, see a God that cares about the minutia, that cares about the minuscule, the moments of life, and he loves us. Not only is he powerful enough to fix it, he loves us enough to actually accomplish it. And his presence and grace in our life is enough for us. And finally, out of that, he gives hope. We have a hope in a God who calls us his, who wants to rescue us, who is the giver of all good things, and who walks through the journey of life with us. That is our hope. A hope that sometimes we see the fruition of our dreams in the here and now. That the journey that we are on is shaping and changing and moving, and the stuff that God told us in the beginning, he is faithful and he will finish it. But also a hope that if we don't see it in this life, that if we don't experience what we thought was gonna happen here, that we have an eternity with him. That he gives us hope. And in those statements, he is forming us, helping change our desires to want not just what we think we need, but what is actually good for us now. I'm gonna ask that our ushers to come forward at this time. We're gonna conclude our service today through communion. And one of the things I want you to think about is you take the elements. We have a little piece of bread and a cup of juice. Take one of those and hold on to them. We'll take them at the end. If you need gluten-free, we actually have a little cup with some pieces in it that are those. But as we think about that moment of communion, this Last Supper that Jesus has with his disciples, that's what we're talking about. This is what we're reenacting. And there's this moment where we realize that the hopes and the dreams of the followers of Jesus are being utterly destroyed. They had given up everything to follow this guy, their families, their friends, their former employment. And they had left because they thought Jesus was gonna fix it, that Jesus was gonna be the Messiah they needed and desired and wanted. And he's telling them, guys, I know what you thought, but I've gotta die. And everything that they've hoped for has now been dashed on the rocks of reality. But in that, God is telling them, I have a plan. This has a purpose. Let me show you what your dreams and your hopes can truly be if you find them in me. Would you reflect on that for just a moment? We'll take communion together.